Hey friends, welcome to Carly and the Christian Cowboy episode 2. If you missed episode 1, make sure you go back and catch it, otherwise you might get lost. Thanks for joining me. Here we go. Carly watched the town flash past the window. The phrase, "Don't blink, you might miss it," came to mind. The same could be said of Carly's time in Washington. Her parents had moved to Cascadia right before she started high school. By her sophomore year, her parents had divorced. Carly had followed Mom back to California for her junior year, but then, tired of basically living alone while Mom worked 80-hour weeks, she had returned to Washington to live with her dad and her brother Teddy. It had been a balancing act of visiting each parent ever since. Eventually, she'd grown tired of both of them. But now, here she was, slipping into Daddy's pocket. Christian sped into County General's parking lot, slammed the truck into park, and jumped from the truck. Not knowing what else to do, Carly followed. He went right through the wide glass doors. She shouldered her bag and went left. The sun settled on the mountaintops. If she tried to walk the 14 miles to the ranch, it would be dark by the time she arrived. Without street lights of any kind, the wilds of Washington came to life in the dark. Coyotes, bear, moose, elk, wolves, the list went on and on. She paused in front of Romano's Pizzeria, overcome with memories. This place had been the high school Friday night hangout after football games, dances, and sports meets. Pushing open the door, her senses reeled from all the familiar scents, garlic and cheese, and sounds, the smacking pool balls, singing jukebox, and pinging pinball machine, and the sights. The neon lights in the windows, the red faux leather booths, the black and white tile floor. Daddy, who had been raised by full-blown Italian parents, hated this place and claimed there wasn't a good Italian restaurant west of Chicago. Carly had been hoping to find Debbie Romano behind the counter, but was disappointed to see a dark-haired, heavily tattooed girl wiping glasses with a white cotton rag. "Can I help you?" "Yes, I'd like to order 2 pizzas." If all the Haywood family had gathered at the hospital, the 2 pizzas couldn't feed all of them. But the idea of juggling 3 pizza boxes down Main Street was just too much. Still, she added an order of garlic bread. "Can you make it to go?" "Sure thing, miss." "It looks like a stroke," Dr. Emery told Christian. "We'll know more after we run some tests." "She's not going to die, is she?" Seth stood beside Christian, trembling with nerves. At 18, he'd probably reached his full height, but unlike Christian and his brothers, he wore a lean and hungry, gangly puppy look. Dr. Emery gave Seth a compassionate pat on the arm. "I'm sorry, son. I wish I had more definitive answers for you." Christian blew out a breath and stared out the window. "Can we see her?" "Not yet, I'm afraid." Dr. Emery glanced at his charts. "I'll be back to check on her in a couple of hours. I suggest you boys notify the rest of your family and grab some dinner." The doctor shuffled down the hall, leaving Christian and Seth alone in the lounge. "What if she dies?" Seth dropped against the wall and addressed the ceiling. Christian's heart twisted. He longed to confide in his siblings, but he had made a promise to his father. "I don't know." Seth peeled away from the wall and crossed the room to look out the window. "I didn't know what to do. I thought about calling an ambulance, but they're so expensive. I just picked her up and put her in the old Ford. The whole time she kept twitching and rolling her eyes. I thought she'd fall off the bench, even though I strapped her down and all." Christian squeezed Seth's shoulder, hoping his touch could convey all the things he wanted to say. "Don't worry, have faith. Things are never as bleak as they seem." "I just didn't know what to do," Seth said again. "Medical bills, they can wipe out a ranch, and we're barely squeaking by as it is." He rubbed his nose with the back of his hand. "We'll be okay," Christian said with absolute confidence. Seth hunched his shoulders, schlepped over to a chair, and fell into it. He folded his hands, placed them between his knees, and stared at them. "This is the end of us. We'll have to sell to Uncle Bart. I wish Dad were here. He'd know what to do." "I need some air." Christian bolted down the hospital hall. Guilt rode on his back like a burr stuck to a horse's butt. Abandoning Seth while their mama lay dying wasn't much better than breaking a promise, but he had to think. He had hard decisions in front of them. He nearly plowed into Carly. What was she doing here? And with all those pizza boxes? "I thought you guys might be hungry." With her flushed cheeks and bright eyes, she looked good enough to eat, and she smelled good too. "There's just me and Seth," Christian said. Well, then you can take some of this home. Christian stared at her. Could she help him? She had been one of the smartest girls in his grades, and she was an attorney. Wasn't there some sort of law that said they had to keep secrets? But that was only if he was her client, right? Christian blinked at Carly as if seeing her for the first time. Can I hire you? He blurted. Hire me? Carly echoed. He bobbed his head, feeling like one of those President Clinton bobblehead dolls. I'm not licensed in the state of Washington. I just need some advice, real quick. Someone I can trust, someone who can keep a secret. Lawyers have to keep their clients' secrets, right? Carly cocked her head. He thought she was the prettiest woman he'd ever seen. What kind of secrets do you have, Christian? He heard the suspicion in her voice and winced, guessing that she probably thought he was running drugs or hiring out women or something. It's not illegal, I promise. He watched her tension slightly ease. Her tongue flicked out over her lips, and she seemed to be carefully considering her words. Okay, I'm not sure I can help you, but I can listen, and assuming you're not doing anything illicit, I'll keep your secret. Come on, let's go and find somewhere quiet we can talk. Christian took the boxes of pizza from her. We'll leave these for Seth and the others. They should be here soon. He strode down the hall in search of his brother. Carly trotted after him. Where are we going? I guess back out to the truck, he threw over his shoulder, if that's okay with you. All the Haywood boys were built like Mack trucks, but Christian, the oldest, was the biggest and most wild-looking. In high school, because of their fiery tempers and quick fists, they were considered dangerous. Carly followed him through the hospital, almost skipping to keep up. Outside, heat on the asphalt shimmered like an invisible force. The truck's cab felt like an oven, and Carly hesitated before climbing in. Christian started the engine, and the air blew like a furnace. It'll cool down soon. Carly climbed in, closed the door, and swiveled to face Christian. She was anxious to get home, but since Christian was her ride, she didn't feel like she had much of a choice. Christian raked his fingers through his hair. I made a promise to my dad before he died, and now I'm thinking, what kind of promise? He didn't want my mom and my brothers to know. He let out a long sigh and dropped his head. His woolly hair looked like it belonged on a black sheep. I haven't told anyone this, and, well, it's been weighing on me. Compassion swept through Carly. His father had died recently, and now he might lose his mom, too. Neither of his parents were that old, mid-50s maybe. But they'd probably had a hard life trying to eke out a living on their ranch. Christian lifted his gaze to meet hers. We're rich. Carly rocked back. Excuse me? We're rich. His words spilled out of him as if he were confessing an indiscretion. Like, filthy rich, richer than the Nordstroms. I know, because I looked up their net worth. I don't understand. Is this supposed to be a problem? This is your secret? Dad, he hated the rich. He thinks money destroys character, makes lazy and self-centered people. Christian took a shuddering breath. Do you know that Seth didn't call an ambulance because he thought we couldn't afford to save our mama's life? He put her in his old truck and drove her here himself. If he had called an ambulance, she would have had medical attention for the 20 miles it took him to get here. If she dies, it'll be my fault. Carly put her hand on his thigh. Your dad couldn't have foreseen this situation. You were just doing what he asked you to do. But maybe that wasn't the right thing to do. He inhaled long and deep before blowing out a breath. I just want to do the right thing. How can I help you? You must know I can't make this decision for you. Just listening helps. It feels so good to get this off my chest. He eyed her. What do you think I should do? Tell my siblings? What about Mama? So, are you telling me your mom has no clue about her net worth? No, and if she finds out, she's going to be furious. She might start hating him. I bet. If Carly had been in her place, she would be livid. Marriage should be a partnership, and for some, money equaled power. Marriage also required total transparency, a lesson her mother never learned. That's one of the reasons he didn't want anyone to know, Christian said, dragging her thoughts away from her own parents' complicated relationship. So, no one knows? Dad says no, but I'm pretty sure Uncle Bart does. Why? Because he's always trying to buy her land. And the money's in the land? Christian cocked his head. There's a gold mine on the back 50 acres. Hartley Mines? You know about it? He looked relieved. Yeah, my family owns that, but like I said, I'm the only one that knows. Someone else has to know. Everything is handled by an accountant. He lives in Seattle. We've never even met. I probably need to fix that. Christian sounded as if he were pronouncing a death sentence. Carly felt a wave of compassion. Money doesn't make you a good or a bad person. It just makes you more of who you really are. If you're generous, you'll be more generous because you can be. If you're greedy, you'll be even more greedy. She paused and added gently, you don't seem like a greedy sort of guy, Christian. I try not to be, but you don't know how hard it's been for me carrying the secret around. Nursing broken old farming equipment along when I know we could just buy a new combine, and now Mama. As if on cue, a large old station wagon rattled into the hospital parking lot and Haywoods began spilling out. The girls were as beautiful as the boys were handsome, tall and lithe with waist-length dark curly hair. All of them wore tight, concerned expressions. You should be in there with them, Carly said. They'll need you. Should I tell them? What does your heart tell you to do? Christian put his hand on the door. It's telling me to go and sit with my mama. Hey, listen, I've called Mateo. He works for us. He's coming to take you home. You're paying someone to drive me home? He grinned. I'm rich, remember? Later, when the moon had made a showing, Mateo dropped her off at her dad's house and carried her bags to the front porch. Mindful of his gaze on her back, she picked up the green watering can beside a pair of rocking chairs and shook the key into the palm of her hand. It slipped into the lock and the door swung open. The house smelled of wood smoke, leather, and her daddy's clove-scented aftershave. You gonna be okay all the way out here by yourself? Mateo asked. Carly nodded and said goodbye. Inside, she turned on all the lights, dropped her bags by the stairs. Her dad hadn't redecorated since he'd first moved in. The furniture her mom had bought still occupied the large living room. The same Western-themed paintings hung on the wall. Carly moved to the window and kept her gaze on Mateo's disappearing taillights and called her dad. It rang several times, and every time it did, Carly felt increasingly lonely. What had she done? Settling into the crook of the sofa, she pulled a throw quilt into her lap and picked up the TV remote. After a few minutes of channel surfing, she tried her dad again. Outside, a coyote howled. A pale moon hovered above the tree line. A few faint stars pierced the periwinkle blue sky. She couldn't see the coyote, but a light from the Haywood house made her feel less alone. Still, should she call Christian just to make sure his mom was okay? The coyote began to keen and yip. Was there more than one? Her phone lying on the sofa buzzed and skirted across the leather cushion. Carly darted across the room and picked it up before it could scoot off the edge and land on the hardwood floor. Hello? She sounded breathless. Carly? Daddy, she breathed out and her knees went limp with relief. What are you doing here? Carly burst into tears and all of her worries tumbled out. Daddy waited patiently until she finished. Of course you can stay. Make yourself at home and you can pick up legal work in town, although I can't see you wanting to stay long term. Carly glanced across the pasture at the Haywood house and thoughts of Christian returned. There is barely enough to keep me busy, Daddy was saying, and if you really want to stay, you'll have to take the Washington bar. She interrupted him. Daddy, there are coyotes. He laughed. You're safe inside, sweetie. Carly returned to the sofa and pulled the quilt into her lap. I know, but it was the coyotes' land first, he reminded her. She thought of Christian and all the land he supposedly owned, which reminded her of Mrs. Haywood. Has Micah talked to his family lately? Just got off the phone with Christian. He was the one who told me you'd come to visit. Or stay. I'm not going back, Daddy. So you say, sweetie. So Micah knows about his mom? What do you think? Should I stick Micah on a plane and send him home? Does he want to come home? Daddy hesitated. He isn't eager to leave. He'll regret staying if his mom... Daddy interrupted her. Christian thinks he should stay and not miss out on this opportunity. Most of those kids will never leave the state, let alone the country. Although they could if they wanted to. But Carly couldn't say that to her dad, so instead she asked, "When will you be back?" "Another 3 weeks or so." 3 weeks. They talked for several more minutes, and by the time Daddy ended the call, Carly didn't feel quite so alone. But 3 weeks? What was she going to do with so much time on her own? And that's the end of episode 2. Stay tuned for episode 3. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this, be sure and hit the subscribe button and the like button, and you'll never miss an episode.